Should you use CPI-E as your inflation gauge for retirement planning opposed to the much more used CPI-U? We're going to talk about that. So what is CPI-E? Well, according to BLS, Bureau for Labor Statistics, it calculates the research price for Americans over 62, i.e. CPI/-E is for elderly people. I don't know why they call it RCPI. I'm not sure what the R stands for, but be that as it may. Let's see. It's used by those interested in measures of price change specifically based on the spending patterns of the elderly, old people. Let's see. It's been used by other government agencies or considered by other government agencies, but not implemented due to the limitations below. So the limitations below are a couple. Expenditure weights. The surveys. The Consumer Expenditure Survey, CES, I use this all the time as well as you. It's basically the closest thing. We have the HRS, the Health and Retirement Study over at the University of Michigan. I like the CES, and you can use them both together, but the CES is fantastic. And there's going to be a lot of similarities between the two. But anyway, this is the best gauge we had because it's our taxpayers that are financing the research on this. I'm not sure if actually how much money I'm sure the taxpayers finance the HRS as well. All right. The Consumer Expenditure Survey is used as a source of expenditure weights for most CPI series. CPI is inflation data. Where are they getting that weight on? That's the Consumer Expenditure Survey. The CE survey sample is designed to collect expenditure patterns of the representative population. CPI-U covers 92% of the United States population. All right, so since the CE sample does not specifically target the 62 and over population, the number of households used for estimating aggregation weights for the use in the research is relatively small, which is only about 1/5 of the CPI-U. All right, so it's a small subset of the total CPI. But it's still pretty big nonetheless. Anyway, the point being is that expenditure weights used in the construction could have a higher sampling error than those used for the larger CPI-U. Anytime you have a smaller N, a sample size, you're going to have a higher sampling error potential. I get that. I think it's reasonable. But it shouldn't dissuade you from using CPI-E. I'll share with you why you shouldn't here in a second. Another limitation, the research consumer price index is weighted, that's what the R stands for, research, is weighted average of price changes for the same set of item strata collected for the same sample of urban areas used in calculating the CPI-U. The areas selected were chosen based on the probabilities proportional to total urban populations. If the sample areas were independently selected to represent the older people, it is likely a different set of geographic areas would result. Yeah, so basically more older people live in Maine than they do in Georgia, for instance. And that would be reflected differently in the CPI-E as opposed to CPI-U. Outlets. Retail outlets are selected for pricing based on data reported in survey representing all urban houses. Older people shop at different places than younger people, presumably. Items priced. Let's see, the categories of items to be priced are selected using expenditure weights calculated from the surveys for the total population. As a result, the specific items and unique goods and services for the older people may not be representative in the overall CPI as much because there's going to be more focus on younger people. And then they don't talk about senior citizen discount rates are used in the CPI in proportion they're used by the urban population as a whole. But obviously, if you're looking at people all over age of 62, all of them will have access to senior citizen discount rates. All right, so that's limitations are minimal in my opinion. I think yes, you should take that in consideration, but not that big of a deal. So let me go into something here. All right, so here is a CPI-E. Let's make that bigger because my eyes I'm getting old, man. This might be too big. Let's make this smaller. Let's do 150. All right. So here's a CPI-E. Here's a Y next to what I think you should use as opposed to what they're using. All right. So 100% is the expenditure category. Food and beverages represent 12%. All right. And food at home is almost 7.8. And food away from home is, hold on just a second, about 4%. So basically, of the entirety of food and beverages, roughly 12%. Food at home is 66%, and food away from home is 33%, which I think makes sense. I think the older you get, the less you actually eat out. I know a lot of people disagree with that. The numbers don't show their side. They don't. They show that side for older people. They eat out less and less and less. Anyway, so it's interesting. So food at home. So food is total 12% of the entirety of the consumer price index for old people. Meats and poultry, about 2% of the entirety food budget goes to meats and poultry. Now, the interesting thing, we got pork, you can see poultry, all that. Eggs, interesting. Not very much to eggs. Dairy, fruits and vegetables. Old people eat fruits and vegetables, just like it. But potatoes. I want to see if we get non-alcoholic juices and beverages. Yeah, coffee. I drink a lot of coffee. Let's see what else jumps out of here. Food away from home, full service meals and snacks, limited service meals and snacks, food at employees. So, I mean, that's such a small amount, you can throw it in there. But food from vending machines and mobile vendors and food at employee sites. You're probably not working. Anyway, I don't think that's that big enough to get rid of. But alcoholic beverages. So I don't drink, so I would immediately remove that. That's about 1%. Now, if you drink, that would be big for you. But again, these are things you need to look at your own budget. How much you spend on alcohol. I spend a big fat goose egg because we don't drink in this house. This is the big one, housing. 47% of the CPI-E is housing, of which 37% is shelter. Jeez, man. So notice, got a Y there. Don't have a Y there. Now, I have a Y by fuels and utilities, all right? I have a Y by fuels and utilities. Don't have housing at school, lodging away from home. You could add that if you wanted to. Rent of primary residence, shelter. No, I don't have any of that. Owner's equivalent, no. Owner's equivalent rent of primary. I don't know why we use this owner's equivalent rent of primary. The whole thing is just weird to me. But anyway, fuels and utilities, of course you want to use. Tenants and household insurance. We got other areas for that for homeowners insurance. But anyway, fuels and utilities, yes. Energy service. By the way, let me show you how this works. This is actually pretty cool, man. They did a real good job at BLS, so kudos. 1, food and beverages. 1, housing. Those are the primary subsects. I don't know, the primary items. So we got food and beverages with the number 1 right there. We come down here. We have housing with the number 1. We come down. We're gonna have transportation. I think is next. Apparel is next. Yeah, basically 2% apparel. It makes sense. We come down here. We have transportation. That's a big one right there. Transportation. Now notice I don't have a Y next to transportation. Why? Private transportation, which consists of new and used motor vehicles, new vehicles. I mean, why would you have 7% of your transport? I mean, are you going to spend 7% of your money on new and used vehicles? I don't think so. Now, we still have motor fuel parts and equipment, motor fuel insurance and maintenance and repair. All that's part of the transportation, but I'm not using this right here. Private transportation in terms of new and used vehicles. See what I'm saying? Well, you lease cars. Why would you use that? Doesn't make any sense. Anyway, so we got number 1 for transportation. We got 1 for housing. We got 1 for food. All right, we keep going down. We got 1 for medical care. Now, this is a big one right there. Medical care represents 11.7% of your total for an old person cost of living. Medicinal drugs. Medical services. And you see, so medical care is number 1, 11.7. 2 is medical care commodities and medical care services. You add those 2 up, and you're going to have 11.7. Isn't that interesting? 3, medicinal drugs. 3, hospital. See, it's very interesting how they break it down. I like this a lot. They do a real good job. So so you'll notice under medical care, which is the topic here, the 2 big ones are medical services and medical care commodities. All right, then you go down. So medicinal drugs falls into 2 other subsets, whatever it is, prescription and non-prescription drugs. All right, medical care falls under professional services, which has physicians, dentals, eyeglass. You see what I'm saying? It's really cool, man. And then another one is recreation. Yeah, definitely want to use recreation. You got TV and audio, televisions, cable, video disc, and other media, and cool renting of video. Yeah. Recorded music, unsampled audio, pets, product. Yeah, you got to put pets in there. So see again, number 1, pets and products and services falls under recreation. I'm using the whole category of recreation in my my sampling here. Then you keep going down, education and communication. Well, why would you use education, books and supplies, tuition? No, you don't use that. However, under communication, we do. So education right here is number 1. We're not going to use the first number 2, but we are going to use the second number 2, if that makes sense. That falls under the number 1 category of education. And I think we got other goods and services. Tobacco, if you don't smoke, don't use that, but whatever. I just throw that in there, and I think that was it. Yeah. So anyway, the point being is, if we look at housing, because housing is look at that, huge. Basically, half the CPI-E for older people is housing, of which 37% of that is crazy how much is attributed to shelter. Now, of that, so number 2, we don't use that number 2, but we do use fuels and utilities number 2, 5%. We use household furnishings and operations, another 5%. Now, you're really going to have windows and floor coverings and other linens? Maybe not, but I think it's legit to think you might. You can decide that for yourself. We go to another number. So housing, furniture, and operations. Those appliances falls under that category. So you don't see a Y next to appliance because it falls under this category, because appliance is number 3. Household furnishings and operations are number 2, which falls under the entirety category of housing. All right, so we go look for another number 2 here, and I guess that's it. So we got right here, household furnishings and operations is 5%. I'm using the entirety of this group. Clock, lamps, and decorator items, I'm using everything. Fuels and utilities, another 5%. I'm using all that as well. What I'm not using is this shelter. So I'm using the 10% from fuels and utilities and household appliances, whatever else it was. But I'm not using this. So of the 47% that's relative to housing, I'm only using 10%. I'm using the entirety of the food, just because food is. You can go through this, and you can say, look, I don't eat any cereals and bakery. I don't care. I'm not going to get that anal about this. Let's keep going here. And again, I just want to point out transportation. I'm not using this whole thing. Number 2. I'm not. No, we are using some of number 2, but I'm not using this number 3 right here. New and used vehicles. Not using that. It doesn't make sense because you probably have a car. You may get a new car, but why would you use that for CPI? Your cost of living hasn't gone up if you're not buying a new car. It'll go up in the future, maybe. You don't know. So you're going to budget for something that could go up in the future based on what exactly? And by the way, cars are depreciating assets. So why would you use that in your cost of living? My spending is going up by inflation each and every year, which consists of what? New and used cars are going up by 7%. Why does that matter? Right? Because I got to buy a new car. Are you buying it this year? No. When are you going to buy it? Later on? How much is it going to cost? I don't know. Okay. Well, let's cross that bridge at that point then, huh, guy? All right, so then we got motor fuel. Well, you're going to need motor fuel, and I see that's number 3. So under private transportation, I'm not using any of the private transportation. I'm not using this number 2 of private transportation. I'm not using this number 3 of new and used vehicles, but I am using this number 3 of motor fuel. I am using this number 3 of motor vehicle parts and equipment, and I'm using this number 3, and this number 3. See, motor vehicle insurance. I hope that makes sense. This is a great thing. So anyway, should you even use it? Sure, but I just be careful how you use it, because if you just use a basic CPI-E, you're way overshooting what your inflation rates are because of CPI-E. I don't know why they do it so much on housing. It's weird to me. But all right. Anyway, hope this helps. I'll let you think about it. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And remember, God is always in charge. All right, we'll see ya.